Okay, let's jump right in with something kind of unexpected. Picture this. A writer, Charles Bukowski, total opposite of the American dream stereotype, right? Alcoholic, gambler, womanizer, struggled for years.
Decades, really. Constant rejection.
Exactly. Lived this really rough life. But when he finally hits it big, becomes this respected poet, and then, passes away, his tombstone, it just says, don't try.
Wow. Yeah, that hits you, doesn't it? Don't try. It goes against everything we're usually told about success and pushing through.
Totally. And that contradiction, that counterintuitive vibe, is really our starting point for today's deep dive into Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
A book with a title that certainly grabs your attention.
It does. So our goal here is to unpack the core ideas, pulling directly from the excerpts we've got. We want to figure out what this subtle art actually is, because it's definitely not about just being lazy or indifferent.
Right. It's nuanced.
Yeah. And we want to give you, our listener, a good feel for the book's main arguments. So by the end, you can decide, hey, is this perspective, this maybe uncomfortable way of looking at things, something I want to dig into more by actually reading the book?
Think of it like a guided tour through the key concepts, based just on the source material we have. We'll look at what not giving a fuck really means, according to Manson.
Why chasing happiness might be the wrong goal. Maybe problems are okay.
And how responsibility is different from fault, the pitfalls of, like, feeling entitled or needing to be right all the time.
Plus, commitment is freedom. And even how thinking about, well, death fits into living better. It's a lot to cover.
It is. But let's circle back to Bukowski for a sec. The book uses him right up front to challenge those typical self-help stories.
Yeah, it's not saying be like Bukowski. Not at all. But that his success came not from trying to be a winner, but from accepting he was kind of a loser. And writing about that honestly, his flaws, his struggles.
Exactly. And Manson argues we're just constantly swimming in messages telling us to be more, happier, richer, smarter, always positive, always give a fuck about everything.
Like that perfect Instagram life.
Yeah.
You have to care about the smoothie bowl, the vacation pic.
Right. And the book says this pressure cooker creates what he calls the feedback loop from hell.
Okay, what's that?
Well, say you feel anxious about something normal, maybe public speaking, but then society tells you, oh, anxiety is bad, you shouldn't feel that. So now you feel anxious about feeling anxious.
So you're stuck, doubly anxious.
Precisely. Or you get mad at yourself for being mad. It feeds on itself because we're told negative feelings, fear, guilt, whatever, are just not okay. Everyone else online looks so happy, so if you feel bad, you must be the problem.
Feeling bad about feeling bad. Got it.
And not giving a fuck, in the book's sense, is the off-ramp. It's not denying the bad feeling. It's feeling crappy and then just going, okay, I feel crappy, so what? Accepting that life is messy, things aren't always perfect, that's just how it is.
So, just to be clear, it's not about apathy, not caring about anything.
Absolutely not. The book really hammers this point. It's about being selective. You have a limited number of fucks to give, right? So choose wisely what gets one. Prioritize based on values you've actually thought about and chosen for yourself.
And that's not easy.
No way. The book calls it a worthy struggle. You'll mess up, you'll care about stupid things, you'll have to keep choosing again and again what truly matters to you.
And there's something about getting older that helps with this. Maturity.
Yeah, the book frames maturity partly as learning what's actually fuck-worthy. With experience, you look back and realize most stuff you stressed about as a kid just didn't matter that much.
You get more selective.
Exactly. You conserve your energy. The book even suggests middle age can be freeing because maybe your energy dips, your identity feels more solid, you accept your flaws more, you save those precious few fucks for family, real friends, maybe a hobby you love. That simplification, Manson argues, links strongly to real, consistent happiness. Old Bukowski might have been onto something about saving energy, even if his life was, chaotic.
Okay, so the aim isn't constant euphoria. No rainbows and unicorns.
Definitely not. It's about thinking clearly about your values, what's important, what's trivial. The book suggests we have this modern sense of entitlement, thinking things shouldn't suck, which just leads to blaming ourselves or finding unhealthy ways to cope.
So practical enlightenment isn't bliss.
Nope. It's getting comfortable with the fact that life involves suffering. Failure, loss, regret, even death, they're part of the deal. The only way to handle pain isn't to dodge it, but to learn how to bear it when it comes.
That really flips the script on how we usually think about happiness, like it's the absence of problems.
Right. And the book says that's a broken definition. It uses this story, an analogy about a prince who runs away from suffering, tries extreme self-denial thinking. Pain itself brings wisdom.
But it doesn't.
No. Suffering is just suffering. It only gets meaning if you give it meaning based on your values.
And then there's the disappointment panda.
Ah, yes. The disappointment panda. The voice of harsh truths nobody wants to hear. The panda basically shows up and says, look, life is just one problem after another. Solve one, create another. The argument isn't to wish for no problems, but to wish for good problems.
Good problems. How is a problem good?
Well, according to the book, happiness actually comes from the act of solving problems. If you have zero problems, you're bored and miserable. If you feel you can't solve your problems, you're also miserable.
So the happiness is in the doing, the solving.
Exactly. It's the activity. Happiness isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you do. It's action.
Like touching a hot stove. The pain isn't pleasant, but it tells you something important.
Perfect analogy. Emotions are signals. Negative ones say, hey, pay attention. Something's wrong based on what you care about. Positive emotions are the reward for taking action that works.
But you still have to question them, right? Feeling good doesn't automatically mean something is good.
Absolutely. Critical point. And suppressing the negative ones, that's like ignoring the stove pain. You miss the feedback you need to actually fix the underlying issue, which blocks real happiness. Pain has a purpose.
And problems don't really go away. They just change form.
Yeah, you solve the problem of being single by getting married. Now you have marriage problems. You solve the problem of renting by buying a house. Now you have homeowner problems. Everything good has a cost, a struggle attached.
So real fulfillment needs that struggle.
That's the message. You earn fulfillment by choosing which struggles you're willing to put up with, which problems you're willing to manage. Anxiety, loneliness, a tough job. You don't avoid the negative feeling. You accept it and then act on the problem based on your values.
There was that really potent question in the book. Not what do you enjoy, but what pain do you want to sustain?
Oof. Yeah, that one cuts deep, doesn't it? It gets to the core of commitment. The author talks about wanting to be a rock star, loving the idea of it, the image.
But not the actual work.
Right. He didn't love the endless practice, the hauling amps, the dealing with booking agents, the frustration. He didn't love the struggle. So he didn't really try, not in a committed way. He didn't just fail. He didn't give it enough fuck to even get to the point of failing properly.
So who you are is defined by the struggles you choose to take on.
That seems to be the takeaway. People who are fit, they usually enjoy the struggle of the gym, or at least tolerate it for the result they value. People who succeed in tough careers, they embrace or at least manage the specific stresses and politics involved. It's about choosing your particular flavor of difficulty. Your struggles define your successes, and success just brings better problems.
And this ties into how the book talks about victimhood, right?
Yeah.
And taking responsibility.
Big time. It points out this tendency, the victim mentality, where the default is always blaming someone else or circumstances for your problems.
Which feels good for a second, maybe. Easier.
Yeah, it's easy. You get sympathy. You feel morally right for a moment. But long term, it leaves you feeling powerless, stuck, angry.
So responsibility is the way out.
Yes. But, and this is crucial, the book distinguishes responsibility from fault. They aren't the same thing.
How so?
Okay, if you cause a car accident, you're probably both at fault and responsible for the damages. But the author shares a story about an ex cheating on him. She was at fault for cheating, no question, but he realized he was still responsible for his own reaction, his misery, how he processed it, how he chose to move on.
You can't control others, but you control your response.
Always. You choose how you interpret things, how you feel about them, what values you apply. He took responsibility for his own emotional state, worked on himself, chose better values for future relationships.
And looking back, he could see his part in it too.
Exactly. How maybe he enabled some unhealthy dynamics. So taking ownership of your problems, even when someone else clearly caused the initial harm, that's where growth lies. Blaming just keeps you stuck.
Even in truly awful situations.
The book doesn't shy away from that. It uses the example of a man whose son died tragically. Absolutely horrific, zero fault on his part. But he is still responsible for how he chooses to deal with that immense pain, how he copes, what meaning, if any, he finds in it moving forward. It's incredibly hard, but the responsibility for his own life remains his.
The OCD example too, with the teenagers.
Right. A genetic condition, absolutely not their fault. But through therapy, they learn to accept it, accept the imperfections it caused, and take responsibility for how they chose to live with it, managing it by changing their values and how they measured their own lives.
So we don't choose the hand we're dealt.
But we always choose how to play it. That's the essence, even if it's a terrible hand.
And the book suggests that online culture, maybe victimhood chic, pushes against this.
It argues that, yeah, social media can make it really easy, even rewarding, to just blame others constantly, even for small things. Outrage gets clicks, blaming gets validation. It becomes addictive, this feeling of being wronged, feeling morally superior. But it distracts from solving your own stuff and maybe even from helping actual victims of serious issues.
Okay, let's link that to entitlement. The book hits that hard too.
Definitely connected. Entitlement often fuels that victim stance. It's the feeling that you're special, so you deserve good things, easy success, no hardship.
Like Jimmy, the startup guy.
Perfect example. Felt entitled to success just because he had an idea. His self-esteem was totally based on fantasy, not on actually doing the hard work or facing reality. Entitlement creates this bubble where everything either confirms how awesome you are or it's an attack on your specialness. It's just a recipe for unhappiness, Manson argues, a constant chase for validation.
So true self-worth isn't about feeling great about your strengths.
According to the book, no. The real measure is how you feel about your negative parts. Can you look at your flaws honestly? Yeah, I screw up sometimes, or I was lazy there, and then actually try to improve.
Entitled people can't do that.
Because it punctures the bubble. It shatters the fragile ego. So they deny, they blame, they can't grow. The author admits his own struggles with this, needing external validation constantly when he was younger.
And this ties into the tyranny of exceptionalism.
Powerful phrase, isn't it? The idea is that our culture, especially with media and the internet, blasts us with extremes. The super rich, the overnight viral star, the perfect body, or even the most horrific victim story.
So average feels inadequate.
Exactly. It makes normal people feel insecure, like they're not enough, which then drives them to compensate, maybe through entitlement, I must be special, or addiction, feeling they have to be exceptional just to matter. It's presented as a societal side effect of being constantly shown the outliers.
Okay, another trap seems to be needing certainty.
It's a huge trap. The book basically says certainty is the enemy of growth. Think about it. Almost nothing is truly certain until it's already happened, right? Except maybe death and taxes, as they say.
So embrace doubt instead.
Yes. Actively question yourself, your beliefs, your feelings, your assumptions. Ask, could I be wrong here? It's uncomfortable. We hate being wrong. But it's essential if you want to change or learn anything.
It was interesting how the books pointed out, we often don't even know if something is good or bad while it's happening. Hard times can shape us.
They really can. And our brains, they're kind of messy, honestly. Biased. The book mentions studies showing how easily we see patterns where there are none, how we invent meaning. We're wired to confirm what we already think is true.
We ignore stuff that contradicts us.
Totally. And memory is super unreliable. We rewrite our past all the time to fit our current beliefs or values. The story about Meredith and the false memory of abuse.
That was intense.
Yeah, driven by her existing values, maybe suggestive therapy, sensational media. It shows how easily we can construct a whole reality that lets us be the victim and avoid taking responsibility. It's a cautionary tale.
So the takeaway is, trust ourselves less. Be more skeptical of our own thoughts and feelings.
Questioning ourselves, our motives, our sacred cows is presented as the logical way forward. Certainty leads to being rigid, stuck, blaming others. You have to admit you might be wrong about your beliefs or actions before you can fix the problems they might be causing.
And this bumps up against our sense of identity.
Oh, absolutely. We defend our identities fiercely, the values tied to them, even if those identities aren't serving us well. We're biased to confirm who we think we are. So real change often means fundamentally shifting how you see yourself.
The book suggests it can be liberating to realize your problems aren't actually that unique.
Yeah. Letting go of the idea that you're uniquely special or uniquely screwed up. Defining yourself in simpler, more ordinary ways can free you from that pressure and the entitlement that comes with needing to be extraordinary.
Okay, pulling this together. Choosing better values, better metrics seems key.
It's the absolute core. The book pushes you to constantly evaluate your values. Ask, what if I'm wrong about even your most deeply held beliefs? The test of a good value is, if you were wrong about it, would that create a better problem for you to solve or a worse one?
Always aim for the better problem.
Even if it's painful, and often, if it feels like you versus the world, the book suggests it's probably just you versus yourself and your unexamined values.
It's a pretty big shift. focusing so much on problems and suffering.
It is. It challenges a lot of feel-good advice. But it leads to another counterintuitive point, the value of commitment.
How so? We usually think more options are better.
Right, the paradox of choice. The book argues too many options actually paralyze us. We're less happy with what we pick because we're always wondering about the roads not taken, so we avoid committing to a person, a place, a career, trying to keep all doors open.
But then you miss out on depth.
Precisely. The book argues the richest experiences, the deepest meaning, often come from long-term investment. Sticking with one relationship, mastering one skill, building one community, that requires saying no to alternatives. Choosing one thing means rejecting others.
The author talked about his own choice to commit.
Yeah, focusing on writing, one partner, one city, a few core friends. He said it felt limiting at first, but ultimately brought way more freedom and depth than constantly sampling everything.
Freedom through commitment. Seems backwards.
It does, but the argument is that commitment sharpens your focus. It cuts out the noise, makes decisions easier, reduces that anxiety of what if. It lets you go deep and find a kind of sustained satisfaction you can't get by just skimming the surface. Breadth might be for exploring when you're young, but depth is where the real value is found later on.
Okay, and finally,
Yeah.
the book ends with death. Heavy stuff.
Yeah, and maybe the ultimate expression of not giving a fuck. The author talks about a friend drowning, this incredibly painful stark confrontation with loss and, well, nothingness.
And that led to a realization.
That if there's no ultimate cosmic reason for anything, then there's also no ultimate reason not to do anything that matters to you. Facing death makes things like fear, embarrassment, small failures just seem like static. Avoiding pain, avoiding risk means avoiding life.
So death provides the contrast, the perspective.
Exactly. It's the boundary that gives life shape and meaning. The book mentions Ernest Becker's work on death terror, this deep, primal fear of not existing.
And we cope by creating immortality projects.
Yeah, ways we hope our ideas, our values, our legacy will live on. We pour so much energy, so many fucks into these projects, often just to avoid thinking about the end.
So not giving a fuck is almost like accepting impermanence.
That's a good way to put it. Becker apparently realized near the end that clinging to these projects was the problem. We should question them, get comfortable with the idea of death. The book presents facing mortality as this bitter antidote that helps us choose our values more authentically without desperately chasing some kind of eternal significance.
Like his experience on the cliff edge.
Right. Forcing himself to face physical danger, the possibility of death, immediately wiped out all the superficial worries, fitting in, being liked, petty anxieties. It brings the ultimate question into sharp focus. What really matters in the limited time you have?
And the book's final point is pretty powerful.
That you are already great, not because of achievements or external validation, but simply because you exist and have the capacity to choose what you care about, what you give your limited fucks to in this confusing world facing certain death. That choice itself, the book says, is what makes you valuable, successful, loved even.
And actively thinking about death meditation, reflection, facing fears, keeps that perspective sharp.
It makes the daily struggles, the entitlement, the anxieties, the need for responsibility feel less overwhelming. The more you look at the ultimate end, the clearer the important things become right now, and the less resistance you feel to just living your life.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck. The core message isn't apathy at all, but this really deliberate practice of choosing your values carefully and accepting that life is going to involve suffering and problems.
Right. And the really counterintuitive part is that happiness isn't found by avoiding those problems, but by engaging with them, solving them, being willing to struggle for the things you genuinely value.
We talked about how it challenges ideas about relentless positivity, suggesting we need to accept and work through negative stuff, and taking responsibility for our reactions, even when we're not at fault, is key for growth.
Yeah, and we touched on the traps of entitlement and needing to be certain about everything versus the surprising freedom found in deep commitment, and how even confronting our own death can help clarify what's truly fuckworthy.
So, for you listening, does this sound interesting? Does this, maybe uncomfortable but practical perspective resonate? This idea of finding happiness through struggle, accepting the negative, being super selective about what gets your energy based on your values. Does it sound like something you'd want to explore more by actually reading the book?
Because the book really pushes that final thought. Facing our mortality cuts through the superficial stuff. It asks, if you're already great just by choosing what to care about before you die, what are you choosing to give your limited fucks to, starting right now?